Imagine you're in 1986 Soviet Ukraine where life is mostly grim, industrial, and well, gray. But that's okay because you are a nuclear engineer and that's considered a pretty solid gig. Until, of course, April 26, when you're scheduled to work at Chernobyl nuclear power plant in Pripyat. Oh yeah, we know where this is going. The Chernobyl plant had 4 reactors and they're all RBMK reactors, basically big complicated machines that produce tons of energy. They're kind of like the sports cars of nuclear reactors, except with one major flaw. If they get too excited, they tend to explode. Engineers knew this at the time, but fixing it would have been expensive and embarrassing. So they basically put it off with a shrug and, well, where's that gonna happen? So on this fateful night, the crew is planning a safety test on reactor 4. The idea is to see if the nuclear cooling system could function during a power outage. Here's where things get a little complicated. The test was supposed to be done by the day shift engineers who were trained and had available resources and knowledge to fix if things went wrong. But due to delays and issues, it pushed it back until, well, the night shift's crew. Now, night shift, as everybody knows who might have worked it, you're not exactly always clocked in mentally. Not only that, but they tend to be less trained and experienced in their job, which is exactly what happened here. So basically what they have is untrained, inexperienced, sleepy scientists basically working on a giant nuclear bomb. What could go wrong? So they begin the test by dropping the power output, but then they accidentally drop it way too low to the point that the reactor is basically muttering, "I can't do this." At this point, you might think they'd stop and recalibrate or just do something to basically get the reactor under control again. But nope, we're talking about the Soviet Union. They just decided to press forward, shutting off the reactor's safety features one by one. Like they were ticking off a checklist of like, okay, well, this is awesome. We don't need this. Like, cooling system? Nah. Let's go and disable the automatic shutdown. Who needs that? You can't shut this down. We're getting this power. Now, without the safety systems, as you might guess, the reactor is building up a lot of heat and pressure. You can basically think the reactor kind of like a giant pressure cooker with the lid just firmly locked on, keeping all that pressure inside. Then, just as they were trying to shut it down manually, because obviously their screens were just going haywire, they press a button that should, in theory, insert control rods made of graphite to stop the reaction. Problem, the design of the rods were flawed in its entirety, and inserting them quickly made the core even more unstable by producing a small percentage reaction from the very control rods that were trying to slow it down. Eventually, the reactor's just kind of like, all right, chief, deuces, and launches a 1,000-ton steel concrete lid. I want to repeat that for emphasis. There was so much pressure built up in this reactor, it launched a 1,000-ton concrete lid. An explosion of radioactive gas shoots up into the atmosphere and pieces of burning radioactive graphite rain down around the plant. In Pripyat, just a few kilometers away, people noticed a weird glow in the sky and think it's just some strange light show. Even firefighters who came rushing in have no idea they're stepping into a radioactive dead zone. One firefighter, unluckily for him and unknowingly, standing right by the reactor, picks up a chunk of graphite, not knowing that it is unimaginably radioreactive, and he's just kind of like, oh, well, that's odd. Why is it warm? Meanwhile, the Soviet officials try to cover up the whole incident because, you know, Soviet Union admitting something went wrong just isn't their style. It's not really what they do. But by then, a massive radioactive cloud had already started drifting across Europe, and them doing so actually killed hundreds of people because of their lies. Eventually, Swedish scientists detect the radiation and call up Soviets like, hey, guys, there's this weird radioactive cloud floating our way. Do you know what's going on? The Soviets can't really, like, deny it anymore and finally admits, okay, maybe we had a slight nuclear incident. They evacuate Pripyat 2 days later, but by then the people have already been exposed to high levels of radiation. And I want you guys to remember that on ways to die, radiation poisoning is one of the worst ways to go. These poor people had no idea what happened, and they're only gonna find out when it's basically too late. The aftermath is catastrophic. Hundreds of thousands of people are forced to evacuate, and the area around Chernobyl becomes an exclusion zone, basically a radioactive no man's land where time stood still. Reactor 4 is eventually encased in massive steel structure called the sarcophagus, built to contain the radiation for, well, hopefully forever, right? And so the Chernobyl disaster became one of the worst nuclear accidents in history, largely due to a mix of flawed reactor design, under-trained operators, and a safety test that was, ironically, anything but safe. The moral of the story, if you're doing a safety test on a reactor, maybe keep the freaking safety systems on. But anyway, this is your boy's Demons Carnage. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you guys next time. Peace.